Hi, I'll be presenting today on behalf of a number of graduate students from the University of Hawaii at Manoa, most notably Jillian Breithaupt, who originally came to me with this idea and challenged me on the use of smartphones in language documentation, as well as Nathan Adamson, who helped very much in creating the comparisons with different equipment. So the goals of our talk today is to better understand the capabilities and limitations of smartphones for modern language documentation projects. And to do this, we're going to compare the outputs of smartphones with consumer and prosumer equipment in key areas of language documentation. We had originally wanted to do both audio and video recording as well as scanning, but because of some time limitations, we'll just look at audio and video recording. So smartphones have been a part of language documentation for more than a decade now. And many people, as we've seen smartphones progress and become more accessible around the world, even among communities that lack other technological resources, we've seen that that smartphones can be leveraged for language documentation purposes. This is probably most notably with the Aikuma app and as well as other apps that were created as a part of this, this project, where you could do recording and translation all within the app, using the kind of implementing the basic oral language documentation methodology. And we see this even 10 years ago, where you really saw the proliferation of smartphones, or they were already a part of. They were already very accessible. And so from this quote, we can really see that smartphones are accessible, familiar to many people, and sufficient, or so we think. And that's the question that we hope to answer today. So since this quote over 10 years ago, we've seen that smartphones have continued to develop. And the use of smartphones in language documentation, we would argue, and I think many people would agree, they need not be connected to a particular app, but can be utilized for various purposes, not just for documenting languages, but also accessing language documentations, which others have talked about. So our motivation for this project is really a part of efforts to provide training to individuals and small groups of people to document their own languages with equipment that they already possess or can easily obtain. And one clear example, a recent example of this that many of the co-authors on this paper were a part of is Carolinian LDTC workshops, LDTC being the Language Documentation Training Center, housed at the University of Hawaii at Manoa. And in this project, LDTC members trained a team of 5 members of the Saipan Carolinian community in weekly remote workshops on language documentation skills from February to May 2024. And the focus was on community-facing projects, such as recording interviews with elders and creating community materials. And due to a lack of funding and equipment at this time, the Carolinian community was trained to complete all of these tasks themselves using the smartphones that they already had. So, that's our motivation in looking at this question. But the challenge for smartphones is that all else being equal, so coming out in the same, being released in the same year at similar price points or comparable price points at least, we would expect camcorders, audio recorders, and DSLR cameras to perform the tasks with which they are for which they're designed better than any given smartphone. That's what we would expect. And there are common complaints from vloggers and other content creators of when using smartphones, things like the many distractions, getting notifications, or other things that can pop up on your smartphone, limited storage that's built-in storage often in smartphones, limitations in battery life, as well as few inputs for microphones, additional headphones that all are common with other recording devices. and manual operations, all of the buttons that we see on other devices are difficult to access in smartphones. But we find here the bottom line is that smartphones are actually sufficient for most documentary linguistic activities and produce quality outputs, especially for video. And we see that the limitations seem to have less to do with the quality of the output that the smartphone is actually creating than they do the operation of the design, which obviously will affect the output. So let's first take a look at an audio comparison that we did. So when you compare solid-state audio recorders to smartphones, we can see that solid-state audio recorders record in archival standards, and now even much, much higher than these archival standards at 96 kilohertz 24-bit. They typically have high-quality XLR inputs for multiple external microphones with phantom power. These recorders are easier to monitor recordings with headphones using a peak meter and adjusting levels on the fly, even as you're recording. Smartphones, on the other hand, don't quite have the ability to record at such high levels, but Androids can achieve archival standards, and iPhones can record at 48 kilohertz 24-bit, which is perfectly accessible and acceptable and even recommended by some archives. Smartphones, on the other hand, have few inputs, even iPhones, which just have a single input, which means that external XLR inputs are only available if you buy some sort of accessory. And monitoring these recordings is only possible within recording apps that have meters and accessories that would allow you to have multiple inputs where you could plug in headphones. So in order to look at this, we made a simple comparison using two lavalier microphones, one with a Zoom H6 and another with just an iPhone SE. On the iPhone, we used the Voice Record Pro app, which allowed us to record waveforms at 48 kilohertz. And we recorded this in a sound booth. Ikalau Mise read The North Wind in the Sun in Palawan, her native language. And so if we look at the comparison here in the spectrograms, we see that, first of all, that the Zoom H6 has a relatively clean sound with higher levels of amplitude compared to the iPhone, which looks like it has a fairly clean sound as well, but has much lower levels of amplitude. So we can listen to this.
Adilu asamasil samlikaw munday el giri laklisiir esalangalak lataraad el blail rabail.
And now the iPhone, which is much quieter.
Adilu asamasil samlikaw munday el giri laklisiir esalangalak lataraad el blail rabail.
So while both of these recordings are acceptable, if we see that the iPhone is much quieter, most likely because we didn't turn the gain up enough in the app, which is one of the difficulties with using smartphones and audio recordings. If we did turn up the gain, we would likely have more noise, and the recording would be more noisy, although it would be heard more clearly. So when we reflect on this, we see that both will actually produce good enough recordings or sufficient recordings, whereas the solid state recorders really can produce pristine audio, whereas smartphones, they fare pretty well. Adjusting the levels with the peak meters and monitoring with headphones is very straightforward in audio recordings and gives you the best chance at getting the best sound, whereas the apps do provide support with peak meters and being able to record uncompressed audio, but these you have to be careful because they're in the app themselves, and it's a little bit trickier when recording. Moving on to video now. Video recording is a bit more complicated, which is expected. So if we look at the difference between consumer or prosumer camcorders and smartphones, we see that both record in standard formats. The consumer prosumer cameras typically record in AVCHD, which is not as easy to work with as what smartphones usually produce, although some consumer prosumer camcorders do record in MOV and MP4 as well. Camcorders, again, are easy to monitor with peak meters and headphones, whereas this is not the case, again, with smartphones, although it is possible to monitor sound. Lenses on consumer or prosumer camcorders can be wide, but they also have lots of optical zoom with the ability to really zoom in on particular things you're looking at or record something from a distance. Smartphones have wide lenses with no optical zoom. There's a question here, of course, whether this is important for language documentation or if we can get away without so much zooming. Prosumer camcorders are able to store things externally on SD cards, which can be quite large and be quickly changed, whereas smartphones, the space is limited is built in and can be limited, which can fill up quickly with video. Camcorders have better ergonomics, so there's an adjustable viewfinder, better grips, easier handling, whereas with smartphones, the handling is not as ideal. So in order to compare camcorders to smartphones, we looked at two camcorders. One is a prosumer camcorder, the XA20, and as well as a consumer camcorder, which is the Zoom Q8. And we compared this with an Android phone and then an iPhone. Most of the settings were the same, although some of the settings were a bit different, but we do not think that this made actually much of a difference in our comparisons when we look at them. So let's take a look first at the Zoom Q8. So the camcorder, the prosumer versus the consumer camcorder. And so in this video, we see that on the left side is the Zoom Q8, and the Canon X820, the prosumer camera, is on the right side. And clearly from that video, the Canon did much better than the Zoom Q8. So because of that, let's compare the iPhone to the better of the two camcorders, which will be the Canon X820. And now we're looking at an iPhone 13 Pro compared to the Canon X820. And so the Canon, you can see we're sliding back and forth between the iPhone 13 and now we have the X820. And while the X820 is much darker, it seems that the iPhone is much brighter and actually provides a better picture for us. And finally, if we compare both of the smartphones just to see which one might produce a better quality, it appears in this case that while they're both comparatively very good, I think the sharpness of the Android is actually much better than, or is actually better, I wouldn't say much better, than the iPhone 13. So this was a recording that was done indoors. And so looking at some of the project that Jillian did, where she looked at similar camcorders, but not exactly the same in different settings, we can see again, compared to the Canon Vixia, which is also a kind of a prosumer model, with the same Zoom Q8, we see that the iPhone outperforms both of those two indoors with a clearer, brighter picture. And I would say that while each camcorder does okay outdoors, that again, the iPhone has the better image quality. So I think in these very kind of simplistic comparisons, that the smartphones simply outperform the consumer or prosumer cameras. The output of the camcorders may be improved by adjusting these settings manually. So it may be that we can increase the quality of the camcorders much more if we adjust some of the levels. And it is important to note that we didn't look at the audio of what was going into these recordings, but the audio was much worse on smartphones. And this is likely a problem of adjusting levels, and additional accessories and external microphones may assist in this. So to conclude the presentation, based on these simple comparisons, smartphones produce sufficient audio files, although we saw that the solid state audio recorders fare much better. But smartphones do excel in creating videos, at least the image the video stream in the videos. And they seem to, in our case, outperform the camcorders. So, of course, further comparisons are needed, much more nuanced comparisons to determine if really camcorders may outperform smartphones with manual settings or under different circumstances. Thank you.